Welcome, everybody. I'm Fred Welt. I'm a professor of cardiology at the University of Utah, and I am chair of the education committee at SCAI this year, and delighted to have the opportunity to talk with my colleague, Tara Jones, a little bit about the issue of creating a match process within the interventional fellowship. So welcome, Tara. And can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what your sort of career aspirations are?
Right. Yes. Thank you, Fred. It's great to be here. I'm Tara Jones. I'm an early career interventional cardiologist at the University of Utah. And my career aspirations are sort of what they were when I came into interventional cardiology. I want to contribute to the field, both by advancing research in cardiogenic shock and training great people to be great interventional cardiologists.
Fantastic. Well, we're here today to talk a little bit about how we sort of funnel applicants into interventional programs and this whole issue of perhaps joining a national match program. Can you tell us a little bit about what your experience was like when you were applying for interventional cardiology fellowship, and how did you consider the issues of applying within the program that you were at versus outside, and how that sort of played out for you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, that stands out is that the interventional cardiology fellowship application process is just very different than anything you've done so far in, your academic training. So there's, a set way that you apply for residencies, a set way that you apply for general cardiology fellowship. And there really is sort of not a lot of organization to the fellowship for interventional cardiology as it stands. For me, it was kind of confusing, especially because I didn't come into cardiology fellowship knowing that I wanted to do interventional cardiology. And I did apply both internally and externally, mostly because there were more applicants in my general cardiology class than there were spots for interventional cardiology fellowship. And I sort of decided a little bit late. And I think the process was it was really confusing to me. And until I sort of identified a mentor that I, and spoke out that I wanted to do interventional cardiology, it's really hard to even know where to start because there's not a centralized place where you can go to see, are there spots available? Some programs participate in ERA, some do not. And so it's just very confusing as it stands.
Well, so, without sort of putting words in your mouth, it sounds like you would potentially support a match process, but I wanted to focus on something that you had just mentioned and that we had talked a little bit about earlier, which is not only that there's this sort of disparity between programs and confusion, but also how it might affect people coming into cardiology who aren't already set on a path for intervention. And whether that might disadvantage some, for instance, women who perhaps have not had an experience with a role model, et cetera, within intervention, and who may not know coming into cardiology fellowship that they're going down that path, but discover over time that they want to do it. Is the process now, do you think, disadvantageous to that sort of person?
Definitely, I think so. We forget that the application process for interventional cardiology is quite early you have to start it sort of even before you're halfway through your general cardiology fellowship. And so unless you've worked really closely with somebody coming into cardiology fellowship, it's hard to know. Many applicants have spent maybe like 2-3 months in the cath lab. And so if you, don't already know, it's kind of hard to make that career decision with such little experience. And I feel like, as you mentioned, there are fewer sort of female interventional cardiologists. And so if you don't have sort of a role model, it may be a little bit harder to say, oh, I want to do this, right away without any sort of real experience in the cath lab. And also, I think maybe women are a little bit more apprehensive to sort of come out and say they want to do interventional cardiology because our female representation in the field is so small. And I think the current system disadvantages folks who decide a little bit later that they want to pursue a career in interventional cardiology. So whether that be men or women, I think people who decide later are at a little bit of a disadvantage. And I think more often that probably is women.
So you're still close enough, I think, to this process and to the fellows, to sort of answer this better than somebody like myself. But what do you think the appetite, for a match is within the fellowship community? Because I think a lot of people have sort of made the point that ultimately it's what the fellows are going to drive this process, right? They're going to gravitate towards the system that works best for them. Do you think that that this is something that's eagerly anticipated?
Yeah, I think so. Speaking to sort of our recent fellows who've come through and people who are currently applying, I think people are comfortable with what they know, and this is sort of the way that they've applied for everything since medical school. And also, it is more fair, to be frank. And I think fellows realize that the current system is organized chaos, really, with these issues of exploding offers. And I think the fellows view it as a way to really explore their options without sort of being penalized by their home program or by a program that may have offered them a spot, but they need to know in 24 hours and that sort of thing. And so I think overall the fellows are wanting this because it allows them to really explore what's best for them in their career rather than just taking sort of the first thing that comes available.
Yeah, the time pressures, I think, are stressful for both program directors and for fellows. It's
right. I don't know of any other job where, in medicine or out of medicine, where you have to sort of make a really big life decision and you have sometimes less than 24 hours to talk to your family, to sort of weigh the risks and benefits, and you don't even know what your other options are. So it's very strange and pretty uncomfortable, at least, for the fellows. And as you said, probably for the program directors too.
That's a great point. Tara, those are most of the questions. Is there anything else that you thought of as we were talking before that you think should be sort of brought to light about this issue?
No, I think that covers the basics of what the issues are with the current system. And I don't really think that there's lots of problems that I'm sure lots of people have sort of rehashed over many years of trying to decide whether or not this is a good thing. But ultimately, I think I would support interventional cardiology being a match process, and many of the early career and current fellows, I think, would as well.
Well, that's great. Well, thanks for your time. As always, you're so articulate, and so I appreciate your thoughts and your expertise.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. I think it's an important thing that we try and push this forward.